I stood frozen in the grand foyer of the house I once believed would be my forever home. Light from the crystal chandelier shimmered across the glossy marble floor, where designer suitcases sat neatly, an unspoken message that didn't need words. My hand trembled as I looked at the luggage. It was the birthday gift he gave me last year, paired with a sweet whisper, "You're the only one who makes this world worth striving for." Now, it was the period at the end of our story. Brandon leaned against a marble column, bourbon in hand, his expression calm, like he had just wrapped up a meeting, not an 8-year marriage. "Sarah, everything's ready," he said, his tone as even as a weather report. "The driver will be here in 15 minutes. You can go wherever you want." I bit my lip. "So this is it. 8 years, Brandon. 8 years. And now you're just kicking me out like I'm a stranger?" He shrugged. "Don't turn this into a tragedy. We both know this marriage served its purpose. You helped me enough, especially when you used your inheritance to kickstart Horizon Grid." I heard my heart crack, but I refused to crumble. "It's easy for you to say, isn't it? You're walking away with a tech empire worth hundreds of millions, and I'm being thrown out on the street." Brendan swirled his drink, arrogance gleaming in his eyes. "You should be proud. Thanks to you, Horizon Grid became a leader in medical data security. But now, I need someone better suited to stand beside me at major conferences and board meetings. Someone like Vanessa, for example." My fist clenched at the sound of her name. His new 26-year-old assistant, who kept showing up in every event photo, always standing a little too close, smiling a little too brightly. "Vanessa understands tech," he continued, as if lecturing a child. "She's strategic and, most importantly, she doesn't let emotions cloud her judgment. You were great in the early phase, but Horizon Grid isn't a garage project anymore. We're on a global stage now." I looked around the mansion. Every painting I chose, every custom piece of furniture, every step we'd taken in this home, it was all built from the $2,500,000 my parents left me after the plane crash. I hadn't hesitated when I wired all of it to Brandon, believing we were building an empire and a life together. But I was wrong. I believed in love. He only needed capital. "I used to be proud I helped build Horizon Grid," I said, my voice calm even as my heart screamed. "But you know what's funny, Brandon? You think you've won. You think this was a game you played better?" He smirked. "Isn't it?" I picked up the suitcase, heels clicking sharply on the marble. Each step was a year I'd poured into him. Sleepless nights, canceled vacations, dinner parties planned so he could network. At the door I turned back. "Good luck with the IPO, really, I'm sure interesting things are coming." His face twitched. He didn't ask questions, but for a brief moment his eyes flickered, uncertain. He didn't know what I'd prepared. I sat in the hotel suite, leaning against the plush armchair, watching the city lights blink through the glass. The 18th floor of the Elara Hotel didn't feel like victory. At least not yet. It was just a pause, a rest stop on the road to one final destination. The truth. I opened my laptop. The soft blue glow lit up the screen. Each file was a puzzle piece, and they all pointed to the betrayal I once tried to ignore. I met Brandon when I was 27, fresh from my MBA in Boston. He was the keynote speaker at a health tech startup summit where I was an invited guest. He was passionate, magnetic, and most importantly, he had big dreams. Horizon Grid was nothing more than a PowerPoint, a few lines of code, and a name no one had heard of. But I was sold. Not on the business model, but on the way his eyes lit up when he said, "Healthcare deserves the best tech protection." 3 months later, I was his wife. 2 years later, my parents died in a plane crash en route from Arizona to California. They left me everything, nearly $2,500,000, plus shares in the family construction firm, which I handed off to be managed externally. Brandon didn't flinch when I offered to invest it all in Horizon Grid. I still remember the look in his eyes, as if he couldn't believe someone could love and trust him that much. We moved from a small rented apartment to a real office space in San Jose. I wasn't just the investor. I was the decision maker from day one, hiring an accountant, signing the lease, creating the branding, recruiting the first employees. 4 years later, Horizon Grid secured an $8 million Series A. The media called Brandon a startup genius, while I was pushed further into the background. I told myself that's how the world works, that I didn't need the spotlight to feel valued. But then, Vanessa came along. She was hired as his executive assistant, 26, with experience at an angel investment firm, blonde, always smiling and with eyes that knew exactly what they wanted. At first I thought Brandon was just being a good CEO hiring sharp talent, but the late-night meetings, the off-hour messages, the looks they shared at big events, soon I stopped wondering. I knew. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I prepared. I hired a personal attorney, Sandra, an old classmate from my MBA program. We combed through every investment contract, every transfer, every email. Evidence of my involvement from day one. Everything was backed up, copied, and triple encrypted. Brandon was too distracted to notice. He was busy traveling, charming Vanessa, and quietly negotiating with future investors. What kept me quiet was a small sliver of hope that he'd see. That somewhere beneath it all, he'd recognize the one who laid the first brick. But that moment never came. Last week I found an email he sent to his private lawyer discussing how to resolve unclear equity from the wife's side. A polite way of saying he was planning to cut me out of Horizon Grid. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just laughed. Quietly, not out of pain, but because the shamelessness had reached perfection. Brandon thought I didn't know, but his biggest mistake was thinking I wouldn't act. I looked at the clock, 11:47 p.m. Tomorrow morning the board meeting would take place, and I would be there. Not as the discarded wife, but as the co-founder of a company worth hundreds of millions. I don't know exactly when I stopped being the disappointed wife and became the silent strategist. Maybe it started the day I was asked to step down from the founding team to avoid conflicts of interest. Brandon said it with a friendly smile, but his eyes didn't bother hiding the takeover. I didn't resist. I nodded, smiled just enough, cool, composed, and from that day forward I began building a separate plan, quietly, step by step. I hired Sandra not just to review contracts, but to dig into Horizon Grid's finances over the past 3 years. She's the kind of woman who doesn't ask out of curiosity, only out of a need for truth. Every week she sent me reports, dozens of pages long, account statements, transfer records, and shady consulting fees I hadn't noticed before. Brandon had no idea that the accounting system the company was using, the one I personally chose, still left secondary access permissions for my original account. And I, playing the role of the friendly ex-wife, could still see every stream of money flowing through each small branch of the company. I discovered a recurring monthly transaction series with the recipient listed as AltoSyn LLC, a shell company registered in Delaware. The odd thing was that AltoSyn had no website, no publicly listed employees, and didn't appear in any operational reports. Yet it was receiving regular payments from Horizon Grid, each time in the range of several $100,000. It didn't take Sandra long to trace the trail. AltoSyn was just a name. Behind it was a web of accounts in Bermuda and Luxembourg, and the person listed as the operator? None other than one of Brandon's close associates, who also happened to be Vanessa's mentor during her training at the company. I printed all the documents, highlighted every transfer, every approval signature, every encrypted email sent from Brandon's account. What I had wasn't just proof of embezzlement. It was the silent testimony of a system designed to erase me from everything I helped build. One evening, sitting with Sandra on the hotel rooftop with coffee in hand, she placed her palm on the folder and said, "If you go public with all this before the IPO, Horizon Grid will be investigated. The SEC will step in. Brandon could lose everything. Are you ready?" I didn't answer right away. I thought of my parents, who worked their whole lives to give me a chance. I thought of those early nights with Brandon, staying up late drafting business plans. And then I thought of Vanessa, sleeping in my bed, sitting in the seat I was once promised for life. "Ready," I said. "But I'm not here to destroy Horizon Grid. I just want to reclaim what's rightfully mine, and stop him from doing worse to someone else." I sent a series of anonymous emails with attachments to 3 board members. Not too much, just enough to raise suspicion. A copy was also delivered to the company's legal office as an internal alert. And I kept the strongest card for the next morning's meeting. That night I got a message from Lauren, my best friend from college. "Are you okay? Don't let him win." I replied with just 2 words. "It begins." I closed the laptop. The city lights below still sparkled, as if the whole world was holding its breath for the final move in a long game. The next morning I walked into Horizon Grid's headquarters as calmly as if nothing had ever happened. The ID badge I'd kept since the early days still worked. The guard at reception blinked in surprise when he saw me. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter," he said, clearly confused. "I thought you didn't work here anymore." I smiled, swiped my badge through the scanner. "Someone must have misunderstood," I said gently. "I'm here to clarify that." The elevator took me to the 32nd floor. The boardroom. I had once walked into that space as a co-founder. Now I returned carrying the truth. The glass doors opened, 12 people sat around the long table, turning to look at me, faces shifting from surprise to uneasy. Brandon stood at the head of the table, wearing a light gray suit, hair perfectly styled, mid-presentation. "This morning we'll vote to approve the IPO plan as outlined last week." He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me. A heavy silence fell over the room. I stepped forward, placing my laptop on the table across from him. "Before anyone votes," I said, voice calm but firm, "I think the board deserves to hear a few things." An older board member, Mr. Fletcher, who once sat next to me in the company's very first meeting, leaned forward. "Sarah, your name isn't on today's guest list." "I'm not here as a guest," I replied, opening the laptop and connecting it to the large wall screen. "I'm here as one of the founding partners and original investors of Horizon Grid." Brandon chuckled, but something in his eyes began to crack. "Sarah, this is an internal board meeting. You don't have the right—" "Yes, I do," I cut in, flashing the screen to the initial investment contract. "This is a wire transfer of $2,500,000 0 cents from my personal account to establish the company. And here's the clause confirming my right to vote on all strategic decisions related to ownership structure, including the IPO." The room went still. I clicked to the next slide. Internal meeting notes, with Brandon's signature still visible, naming me as a co-founder in the minutes. Vanessa, seated beside Brandon, shifted in her chair. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on Brandon. "I'm not just your wife," I said. "I've been with you from day one. I believed, I invested, and I helped build Horizon Grid, from a vague idea in a rented apartment." Brandon tried to recover. "All of that was years ago. The company has evolved. We have a new structure now." I nodded. "And this new structure, is it transparent?" I pressed a key. The screen split. Left side showed the original account statements. Right side showed the outgoing payments to Altosyn LLC, the offshore shell company. "These funds were transferred consistently over the past year without board approval," I said slowly. "And here is an email exchange between Brandon and his financial partner, discussing the division of hidden shares to a third party. Someone whose name starts with V?" Vanessa froze. Brandon's face went pale. "You can't," Brandon stammered. "I can," I replied, "because I'm not stealing anything. I'm just revealing what you tried to hide." Another board member, Keller, representing the primary investment fund, turned to Brandon. "How do you explain this?" No one came to his defense. The room, once Brandon's domain, was now filled only with mouse clicks and discomfort. I looked around. If the board wants to move forward with an IPO based on falsified records, hidden founder capital, and potential federal violations, I'll step aside. But if you choose truth, I'm ready to stay and propose a new path forward. The air thickened. I didn't need to say more, the facts were on the table, and Brandon, even through his forced smile, knew. The game had flipped. The meeting ended in heavy silence. No applause, no polite handshakes. The board members filed out, each deep in thought, phones glued to ears. It was just me, Brandon, and Vanessa left in the space where his power used to be absolute. Brandon tried to stay composed, but his hands trembled as he gathered the leftover papers. Vanessa avoided my eyes, lips pressed tight, her gaze drifting like someone waking from a long dream. The next day, the board officially announced an indefinite postponement of the IPO. An independent audit firm was appointed, and the internal legal team began collaborating with a third party to investigate all financial activity from the past 3 years. Within 48 hours, a press briefing was held. Though Brandon wasn't named directly, the message was clear. Horizon Grid would reassess its leadership structure to ensure transparency and long-term shareholder value. News spread like wildfire, headlines erupted. Billion-dollar startup Horizon Grid halts IPO amid financial fraud allegations. Founder accused of hiding original co-founder's role. Ex-wife appears, turns entire tech empire upside down. I didn't appear in interviews. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence is the most powerful weapon. 3 days later, Vanessa called my lawyer. Sandra? She wants to meet, Sandra told me. And? Not in a confrontational way. Seems like she's reevaluating her loyalties. We met at a small coffee shop in the downtown office district. Vanessa arrived early without the heavy makeup. She looked tired. And strangely, more real than ever. I didn't know it would go this far, she began, voice soft but steady. I thought he really loved me. I didn't react. I let her sit with that realization. But then, she continued, when everything started unraveling, he only cared about protecting himself. He told me to delete emails, burn hard drives, move memory cards to new phones. That's when I realized I was just another pawn. I nodded as if she'd finally seen the picture I'd known for years. Vanessa pulled out a portable hard drive from her bag. Every call, email, message between me and Brandon. I backed it up. I don't want to be part of his mess anymore. I'll cooperate. Sandra took the drive, sealing it carefully in an evidence envelope. We said nothing else. At that point, explanations were unnecessary. A week later, the investigation expanded, this time with the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, officially involved. Preliminary findings revealed at least $9,300,000 had been funneled into offshore accounts without proper authorization. Among them were transactions signed by Brandon and accompanied by emails from Vanessa. Brandon was suspended from his CEO role, pending further investigation. The company's legal firm also declined to represent him, distancing themselves from potential litigation. In just 3 weeks, Brandon went from a sought-after tech legend to a name the financial world turned away from. And me? I didn't feel triumphant, I didn't feel vindictive, I just felt free. One morning I returned to the 28th floor office, the space that once served as my temporary workspace. The glass doors were spotless, the desks still perfectly neat as if no one had ever left. But this time, I was no longer the forgotten ex-wife. I was now recognized by the board as one of the pillars of Horizon Grid. A short handwritten note sat on the desk from Mr. Fletcher. We've reviewed the entire founding history. Thank you for standing by the truth. A great company needs more than great tech. It needs people with integrity to lead the way. I clenched the note in my hand, eyes drifting toward the building across the street, where Brandon once drafted his first pitch decks. I couldn't fix everything he broke, but what we built together, I would protect it, the way he should have. From the beginning. The final board meeting arrived, held in the familiar, elegant room where sunlight poured through tall glass windows onto the polished walnut table. But today, everything felt different. No more Brandon's arrogance. No more wary glances. Only anticipation and change. Richard Fletcher, the oldest board member and a man who always observed in silence, opened the meeting with a steady tone. We are here today to formally finalize leadership decisions for Horizon Grid, following the completion of the independent audit and legal advisory review. I sat across the room, back straight, no smile. In front of me was a thick folder I'd prepared with my lawyer. Every document, every figure, every misstep, Brandon had hidden beneath his polished image. Brandon wasn't present. His attorney had sent a 3-page letter full of denials and requests for delay. But no one on the board had the patience for it anymore. After reviewing all evidence, Mr. Fletcher continued. The board unanimously votes to remove Brandon Carter from executive authority and demand his immediate resignation as CEO. A few murmurs followed but no objections. From a symbol, Brandon had become a liability. We've also worked with financial authorities, he added. Altos and LLC's account and all related offshore assets have been frozen. The investigation continues, and the SEC will determine the next steps. I gave a slight nod. The most important part was coming. Finally, Mr. Fletcher turned to me. The board has voted to appoint Sarah Carter as executive chairperson with full authority over strategic decisions and company restructuring. The room paused. I didn't stand immediately. I looked quietly at each board member, people who once turned their backs on me, who believed Brandon's charm. Now they were placing their trust in me. We believe, Mr. Fletcher continued, Ms. Carter not only holds legal authority, but also the vision and ethics required to bring Horizon Grid back on track. I stood, brushing my fingers across the table, where I once placed coffee for my husband, back when we had just a few staff and a half-formed dream. I accept, I said slowly. Not to get revenge, but to make things right. Horizon Grid was supposed to be a symbol of innovation, not a mask for financial manipulation. I intend to restore that. When the meeting ended, I returned to my office, now with a new brass nameplate bearing my title. The room was bright and open, no longer a place where power operated behind closed doors. I started by sending an email to all staff, a greeting, a commitment, and a clear message: transparency and trust. Within a week, I restructured the legal team, hired a new CFO with industry credibility, and ordered a full audit of all active contracts. Vanessa, as expected, submitted her resignation. No one stopped her. The media kept watching closely. Articles that once praised Brandon now called him a symbol of moral collapse in the startup world. They asked if I wanted to comment. I declined every interview. I didn't need the public on my side. I just needed the truth on mine. One Friday afternoon, I sat alone in my office, looking out at the rooftop where Brandon and I once talked about our future. Young and hopeful. My mind went back to the day I transferred $2,500,000 0 cents, without hesitation, without doubt, to help the man I loved build a dream. I didn't regret the money, I regretted that the man I trusted chose to erase me once he had everything. A month into my role as executive chairperson, the office still echoed with the aftershocks of the scandal. Investigations continued, but the company had stabilized thanks to decisive reform. I wasn't trying to lead a revolution. I simply brought Horizon Grid back to its roots: trust, accountability, and real innovation. I entered Monday's all-hands meeting, my first appearance before the entire staff as the new leader. The room was packed. Familiar faces from my CEO's wife days looked at me differently now, wary but hopeful. I'm not here to build a new image, I began, voice steady. I'm here to rebuild trust. All eyes were on me. I didn't read from the script. I spoke from the heart. Horizon Grid isn't a shield for someone's reputation. It's the product of countless people: engineers, legal teams, IT staff, every line of code, every idea, every step forward. That's your work. I was lucky to be there from day one, and now I have the duty to protect it. I ended not with a slogan, not with hollow promises, but with a pledge. I will not allow anyone, including myself, to place personal gain above ethical business. The meeting ended with applause, not loud but sincere. I knew trust wouldn't return overnight, but today I'd planted the first seed. That afternoon I received an envelope with no return address, just 3 handwritten words, from Brandon. I opened it without hesitation. Inside was a short handwritten letter. Sarah, I once thought I was untouchable, that what I built was unshakable, but I was wrong, and my biggest mistake was underestimating you. Horizon Grid should have been ours. I turned it into a weapon of control. You didn't destroy the company, you saved it. You may never forgive me, and I understand. But if one day you look back, I hope you'll remember that I once believed in the right thing too. Brandon. I finished reading, folded the letter, and placed it in a drawer. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt relieved. Not because he apologized, but because he finally saw what I'd known all along. I never needed to live in anyone's shadow to prove I belonged. 3 months later, Horizon Grid re-entered the tech race with a fully transparent financial model, a new leadership team, and a new motto displayed proudly in the main lobby. Trust is the strongest technology. The media began calling me the woman who resurrected an empire, but I didn't care about titles. What mattered was that every day I walked into the office I got to do what I believed in, with people who deserved to be there. A reporter once asked during a closed-door briefing. If you could go back, would you invest in Horizon Grid again, knowing you'd be betrayed? I just smiled. Yes, but this time I'd sign my name a little bigger. And then, on a spring afternoon, standing alone on the rooftop of headquarters, the same place Brandon and Vanessa once had their secret meetings, I looked out toward the skyline and told myself, "You underestimated me, Brandon, and that was the most expensive mistake of your life." No applause needed, no revenge required. I had risen from what once broke me. And this time, I wasn't following anyone. From a quiet wife behind her husband's success, Sarah was betrayed and cast out of the very company she helped build. But instead of falling, she rose, gathering proof, reclaiming control, and transforming Horizon Grid through transparency and strength. Her story is proof that trust, intelligence, and resilience can turn betrayal into power, and that sometimes, the people you count out are the ones you should have never doubted. What do you think about Sarah's choice? Should she forgive or keep moving forward? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family, courage, and redemption.